I'm in a shade throwing mood.
Should be a good episode. What is a good idea? If I'm there and I'm like, I have an idea, but it's just an idea. How am I like, this is the thing that I should leave everything for and go all in on?
How much it pulls you.
What does that mean?
Pulls you so much because it's such a good idea. Maybe you just ran across an idea, even if it's not your industry or your specialty, but you're like, this is obvious. So it's going to pull you because you're like, I will have success. Something has to pull you because it has to be worth it because it's freaking hard.
You think people would be happier if everyone was entrepreneur?
No. I think people, it's very simple. Right now, Americans are at their unhappiest. They're at home, they're working from home, they're disconnected from their friends, their family, their coworkers. Working is a huge part of that. We don't want to admit it, right? Because we want it to be everything about our personal lives. People can say all they want about, oh, I want to be at home, I want to be at home. But the science says you're also the unhappiest you've ever been. Reconcile those things for me.
We were just talking about like, how can people be happy? How can people be happy in work? If I'm heading into this recession period and I want to be intentional about my work for the first time, what does that mean? What should I be doing? Why is that even something that I should be striving for?
It puts you in the driver's seat no matter what your long-term goal is.
Before we get into the video, YouTube analytics say that 90% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you want to see even bigger guests, better conversations, please subscribe. It really helps us grow the podcast. And with that, onto the video.
Nowadays especially, we've gone away from like the very formal welcome to my.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, I feel like it instantly like, it just deads the vibe. It makes it seem like you're like watching something. I don't know.
It's good if like you've got like an investigative series sort of podcast. I feel like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're just tuning, I think you're right. If you're just tuning into a conversation between two people, it's weird.
Yeah.
Like if the cameras weren't here and we were talking and then all of a sudden I was like, welcome to Callum Johnson's show. If
That
like,
would be hilarious, honestly.
Like, what the fuck is this
Just
guy
walking
doing?
with a friend and suddenly a camera shows up and you're like, welcome.
Yeah.
It's a podcast now.
It'd be strange. It'd be strange. Okay, here's where I actually wanted to start off. Obviously, the topical thing in my life is like, this was the week I left my job.
Yeah.
Made the decision to go all in on the podcast and like building a media company.
Hopefully not the All In podcast. Your own podcast.
I should have just go all in on all in. It would be good stuff. I wanted to know from you, because I know that you started off like working, right? And then I'm assuming there was a certain moment when you decided you were going to go all in on free agency and like being an entrepreneur and doing your own thing. What was that moment? And was there a spark? Like, was there a spark where you were like, I need to change path. I need to go into this direction instead of what I'm doing? Or was it like, I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur and this is just the right time? This episode is brought to you by Free Agency. If you want to take your career to the next level, Free Agency is a company that you should check out. They manage and represent talent in the tech industry, and they provide you with a dedicated talent agent to help you find, engage, and win top-of-market roles that will maximize your earning potential. No more leaving money on the table. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency. Anyway, back to the show.
So I think I always knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur in general. I didn't ever try to time anything though. So my first startup, which is like the 2014-ish time period, I explicitly decided to quit the job I had at the time, knowing that I had a little bit of a concept that I had discussed with some friends that we wanted to test around this theory of what if people could be more intentional about the first job they got out of college. That was all we had. And we got accepted into an accelerator. And we had actually, at that point, though, all quit our jobs to decide to take this on. Then we get into an accelerator and we continue that path for a couple of years. So that was like an explicit choice and an explicit breakup from the life that we were leading at the time. The second time around with Free Agency, so this is at this point, 2019, I was actually, I had left a startup that was somewhere I'd been for a year, leading product, attempting to help a company that had raised significant amounts of funding, but not really achieved any sort of monetary success. At some point, me and a lot of critical staff had become skeptical as to whether it would get there. And so I had left. My co-founder had actually left as well, but we were not yet on this new concept. We both were, going to do different things, and a couple other people in the company had left. And what's amusing, and this is the first time I'm going to be sharing this story in any sort of public format, is the reason that Free Agency exists is because the CEO of the last startup I was at would not waive my non-compete. And so there's a period of 2 weeks where the company that wanted to have me on next to be in a product leadership position, said, hey, we're in the job space too. This is now my trend, is to be in the job space. Could you go get your non-compete waived? And the CEO was a stubborn guy, and I hope he sees it. And and he just said, why would I do it? I don't want to. He knew it wasn't competitive. He knew that startup was failing. The concepts weren't really that similar other than being in recruiting and jobs. And so it took the company I was about to head into about a week or two to decide, okay, do we want to deal with the potential lawsuit here? Let's look into the risks. Yeah. And they come back on a Monday to finally say, hey, look, we're willing to take the risk. Come on over. But that same Monday is the day I had the concept for free agency as it originated. And so that same Monday, I send the original deck to an angel investor in my first startup and say, hey, what do you think about this? And he says, don't take that job. I'm in for the first X amount of dollars, and we'll find you the rest of the round. And so it's never been like that explicit decisioning. I will say the second time around, I definitely didn't want to go like the first time around, which was quit a job, then figure out the accelerator, then go off of like no financing for a long time. So, always knowing that I have that entrepreneurial spirit, always being that entrepreneurial type of worker. But it's surprisingly happenstancey for me in terms of how one led to the other and when those different inflection points started. And yeah, even that last story is funny. It's funny too, because, I heard later on, so I wind up not getting this non-compete waived, wind up coming up with free agency. And then a few days later, I ask the person who wound up being my co-founder, his name is Alex Rothberg, who was my engineering counterpart at the startup we were both working at. I said, hey, do you want to do this with me? He says, yes. So he winds up being my co-founder. And the CEO of the startup we were at, later I heard, thought, oh, they must have come up with this while they were still working here, which could not be further from the truth. Yeah. But again, everything about him was stubborn, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah. What's interesting? As you were speaking, I thought about this. So if the startup that you were working at that wouldn't waive the non-compete, if when you had first asked, they had just waived it,
I would be working at this company. I can share this. I don't mind to share. I'm not going to. Yeah. I mean, people can look up who my last employer was. I don't mind. I'm in a shade throwing mood. And I was going to go to a company called
Should be a good episode.
Yeah, exactly. Really. The company is called Pymetrics. So it's a talent assessment company that's since been acquired. And so that's the company that was considering, the hire and considering that moment. I'd be working there because I was ready to take that offer. They just needed to assess for themselves as to whether they thought, that there was too much of a litigious threat. It was exciting for both of us because, again, I've been in this job space and talent space, and they were working on AI products for talent assessment. So it was a great match. So as soon as that had been cleared, I was ready to take that offer.
Yeah.
That's how life works.
Yeah.
It goes with the wind.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's like these times, and when you're in the moment, it seems like the worst thing in the world, or it seems frustrating. You're like, why?
Yeah. And
then in hindsight, everything was working out and positioning itself at just the right time. It's just such an interesting thing, man.
Well, I think this is where I don't believe in the whole saying people have it all works out. It doesn't all work out because people have bad lives. And so it's unfair to those people to say that. However, insofar as good things can happen when you're not dealing with crisis situations, when it's not health, when it's not, critical conversations or situations of family, when we're talking about our general lives, when we're talking about how all of this from a fundamentals basis, knowledge work, startups, the first world problems that we have, it worked itself out in the sense that, working there, I wouldn't be probably as happy as I am now being the entrepreneurial version of me. But to your point, it worked out in its own way, which is I had an idea and the timing worked out perfectly and it all shook out. And I think if people were open to all of the possibilities at all times, right, that's kind of how I like to be and how I like to encourage other people to be open to new situations, fall in love, what's going to happen next. Whether it's a job, a startup, an opportunity, a company, as opposed to being so fixated on a specific type of outcome. We'll have candidates who come into our service as an example for free agency where we help them find their next job, and they're so fixated on their set of preferences. And I go, is that preference really that useful for you, or is that just something that we can give up if we find upside in other places in an offer?
You know what I find interesting? Someone gave this, I read this book. I don't remember the name of the book. I should probably put that in the show notes. But he gave this analogy. He said, opportunity in life are like buses. And so I grew up in London, right? Anyone that's been in London, the way that the buses operate, it's like you'll be waiting for a bus for like 20, 30 minutes. And then like 3 of them will come in like 5 minutes. And what he was saying is like, that is how opportunity arises.
Right.
There's going to be moments in your life where nothing is happening. That's when you're waiting for the bus. There's no action. There doesn't seem to be any momentum, any progress, but you're still there. And that's what he said.
That's the key part. You have to not leave the bus stop, right?
He said, when that bus arrives, you need to be the person that's like, you've got your money. In the UK, we call it, or in London, we call it the Oyster card. Like that's the card you use to tap in. Like you're ready for the moment. And I think to your point, I actually believe everyone gets the opportunities to differing degrees, obviously.
Right.
Everyone gets the opportunities. I think the thing is, most people, when their bus comes, they like don't have their money ready, or like they're just not in position to capitalize. Or maybe it's even what you were saying, like their mind is just closed to the opportunity.
Right.
And I think it's such a powerful like visualization. It's like you have to be prepared for your moment. And the way that you get prepared is in that period when you're waiting. Right. When nothing is happening. Are you building, I guess in like a job sense, are you building skills? Are you building network? Are you building one of the most estimated things is just being consistent. Yeah. So that when the opportunity comes, you're in a position where like you've already been doing the thing.
I'm going to butcher whatever saying this is, but it's something like luck, you know, the way to influence your luck, because luck seems like something uninfluenceable, is to always be like open to luck, which is putting yourself into opportunities where luck can, you know, put you on the right side of the flip of the coin. Yeah. And there's some more neat saying around that, but it really rung true for me because we can't control our luck. I consider myself lucky in so many ways that other people are not going to be, and they'll have the opportunity to be. And so part of that is in our control and part of it isn't. But the parts that are in your control, if you can expose yourself to opportunities where you get more lucky by knowing people, by attending events, by being part of organizations, by learning about industry, all of those things mean you are more likely to wind up on coin flip's positive side at some point.
Yeah. I also, to go further on your point, I also feel it's like, how do you live your life day to day? Yeah. I see it a lot in the podcast sense because this is what I'm trying to grow and trying to build. But it's like, one of the things I was thinking about, I need to always be in a space where I can have a great conversation. Right. Right. Because I don't know when that guest is going to be. Like I could get in an elevator and there's someone that I've always wanted to speak with. And I don't know, maybe we start talking and he's like, oh, okay, I'll do a podcast. Yeah. I'll do it 5 minutes from now. Like just, let's go in this room and just do it. I can't be like, oh, well, I don't know. I feel a bit stressed. I don't have any questions or tired. Like you have to be ready.
Part of that is also preparation. Part of, you know, being a good podcaster in the space that you're doing it in of tech is like understanding with the zeitgeist, because not only do you have to be mentally ready, have questions, be curious about the person, be ready to engage them with your energy, but you also probably should know about the latest going on that they might be wanting to talk about or they might be relevant to talk to. I think this a lot when you hear different podcasts, when I listen to different podcasts and I think who's good. A lot of people are good. One of the reasons is the consistency that you're pointing out around they listen to these people. And so by the time they have the guest who's been on every other podcast already, they don't ask the questions everyone else has already asked because they've heard this person answer. They answer the ones they know they should get the person to repeat because the answer is good. Yeah. So fine, give it to my podcast too. Yeah. But then they also like ask the follow-up question to a question that was asked on another podcast. It's almost like it's an extension of that. Yeah. And so that ability to stay consistent, up to date, and be aware is really important.
Yeah. It's interesting. The one pushback I would say on that is like, you also have to know like who you are. You have to know like your style. There's certain podcasts that I listen to, and the thing that the host is really great at is their research. Right. They're incredible at research. They'll pull out a quote that the guest said like from 10 years ago, and they'll do it and they'll weave it in, and like it's their background research, which is really good. That's not my thing. Right. I'm not the research guy. Right. I think for me, I remember, I think it was Larry King that said this. He never researched really any of his guests. It was always just in the room, just like face to face, like the energy. And he's going to be so dialed in that moment that it's going to just be a great conversation. And he was saying that like to actually do research, it would kind of distract from that, because it messes up the authenticity of the interaction. I think that's how I feel. It messes up the authenticity of the interaction for me, because if I knew every single thing in your life that you've done, and then I'm like, so how did you start free agency? And I'm like, I already know this guy's whole thing. Yeah. Like, I know the smallest nuances in the story. Even the way I say it, it would be a bit like, I'd be like bored. I'd be like, I already know.
I love that idea though. It's that style, because I think to your point, I go to certain shows that I listen to for insight. I go to others for the conversation. I go to others because I know the host has the same type of curiosity I do. Yeah. So there is that style difference is real. Yeah. Yeah.
On that point, what would you say? What do you think you're really good at? Like, what do you think is your thing that separates you?
I'm going to use what I've been told instead of what I know, because I don't know.
Well, give me both. Tell me what you think as well. Okay. Tell me what you've been told.
I'll start with what I've been told. Okay. And then I'll find what I think. So I've been told that I'm a teacher. That's something that's actually quite recent. It's actually someone, funnily enough, who was interviewing here who was watching my TikToks. And she says, I can tell by like the way you do those that you're a teacher. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. No one's ever called me a teacher. That's not like an analogy that would come up for me, but it rung true. And I think a lot of times when I'm talking about an industry topic or have a new employee on the team, or I'm helping a client think about their job search or even a singular interview, I'm not just trying to get people through a moment. I'm the type of person, I like to go to what's right in the moment, not just what's easy. I like to think about the whole of a situation and, also played the two sides, not just, one of them, let's actually have a principle of generosity and understand, someone else's argument, someone else's attempt or strategy, why it might be useful. All the decisions we make are probabilistic. So let's just learn how to make good probabilistic decisions, good bets. So I think that's right. And I think I'm good at translating some things, but also being direct and teaching and, trying to facilitate people understanding these sorts of complicated topics, again, across different topics, but all in the realm of tech and careers and everything related. I've also been told I'm a great product person. I am a product person by trade, other than when I'm CEOing. And the time this most actually, again, I'm feeling spicy, so I'll share. This is not like a real, the story is mostly about me, but I think it's funny when our Series A investor did references. They said some people love you and some people hate you from your past. And they said even the people who hate you, there was one of them in particular who said, he hopped on the phone and the guy had some things to say. He said, I gotta say he's the best product person I've ever worked with. And this is like a 40-year vet of tech. And so I don't know where that comes from, but if I had to guess, I love product work. I love tech. I love the industry. I'm a nerd and another thing I was once called related to the teacher thing. Now that I think about this, your question is prompting it. Someone said that I'm like a weird encyclopedia of startups. They're like, you just know about too many random startups that no one should know about. And like, where are you just like digesting, pitch book all day? And I think that helps. But I also gain product inspiration from other things. So like, I love baseball, but I also think of baseball not in just terms of watching baseball and the games, but also like, what does baseball give me to think about stats and the advanced stats of baseball? Or what does baseball give me when I think about how well or not well they're marketing and building a brand, and how well the Yankees, my team, are doing at different moves in their roster? How does that inspire my product thinking? What's the experience of waiting in line at a store? Okay, how does that inspire product thinking? And some of that might sound cringe to people, but I think being a good product person is taste making. And so you're collecting a lot of different tastes and a lot of different judgments about how people are doing different things in the world and trying to integrate it. What do I think I'm good at? I think I'm good at product. I think like the core thing, if I had to, drill down to like what's common amongst a bunch of other things that I've either felt about myself or heard about myself, is a real intention to be curious and get to some well-founded or well-evidenced conclusion. Whether that's about a business decision at free agency, whether that's about a judgment just about something I'm reading. I'm the type that I'm going to like see an interesting startup and go, I wonder what else has been tried in this space. Or if there's a policy for the company that I might have an obvious instinct towards, I'll still go find the counter case to it. One of the controversial things that I did in 2021 is I brought the team back to an office probably before anybody else, August 2021. Elon and co had not yet paved the way. And even though I knew I was going to do that, I told the team when we first went into COVID, remote work, I told people we hired, hey, we're eventually going to go back. Still, the week we were coming back to the office, we had signed the lease, I was still doing research on what are all the counter cases. I want to have a good argument. I want to know what downsides I have with the decision I'm making. I want to be able to represent that to people who want to ask me that question. And so I think I'm good at being genuinely curious about this stuff and wanting to come to conclusions. And again, they can be big policy conclusions or just like, how I think about, again, the Yankees. I want to, when I evaluate my own team and I'm a certain type of fan who's going to have an opinion, I'm going to be a fan that doesn't just have the opinion because, I'm watching randomly one day. I'm constantly in tune with the moves we're making, who we've hired in the organization, not just in the major leagues, but in the minor leagues. What's our long-term organizational goals? And that's how I'm going to evaluate like a trade that we made where everyone else is just looking at the trade. And I'm going, what's the wider perspective here?
Yeah. One thing I thought about recently is like, because really what that speaks to is like you just care a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think when you care about things a lot, you're going to go the extra mile. You're going to look like behind the door that most people wouldn't look behind because you just want to be rigorous. You want to be like thorough in your work.
One of our company values, which is memeified as hashtag beyond page 4, is to go beyond page 4 of the Google results. If you're like looking something up for either your clients or for an internal process, don't just find what everyone else finds. Find the beef, find the juice. I don't know why beef is the first thing that came. Don't find beef. But juice.
Maybe that's just on your mind today. It's just like find the beef. Okay. I want to go back actually to the moment of you deciding to create free agency. I feel like there's a lot of people out there, they've had a moment or they've had moments where they're like, I want to do something else. I want to move in this different direction. But then they don't follow up on the moment. Like they might even, something might happen at work and they're like, I just want to leave. And then they just get back to like putting on their work clothes or whatever. And then, so.
It's fleeting.
Yeah, it's fleeting. There's not or even more to say it, there's not the follow through after, because it's not actually really about the moment, which is why I know like on podcast, it's cool to be like, what at the moment that you decided to do? But it's like a long thing. Like I even see that in my own process. It's like, there's several moments and they're not really moments. They're like, it's just how you were thinking about it. What do you think? You mentioned that you sent the idea to someone in your network and they said they would be the first check. Even once they had said that, was there back and forth in your mind, or you were like, nah, this is what we're doing now?
I think that like from a fundamentals basis, I probably had questions in my head as to like what commitment was I making in terms of how is I going to live? What size would this round be? How fast will this come together? But I'm a pretty confident person in making that choice once there was some affirmation. And I think one of the reasons for that's not a direct answer, but the direct answer is, I think there was back and forth that was reasonable, but not too much of it in my brain. But one of the reasons that I think I'm so action-oriented in general in life is I'm okay doing the hard work. My Twitter bio says something like, I'm even going to butcher what my own Twitter bio is. The squeeze is worth it even if there's no juice, which is that the quote is, make sure, I don't remember what the actual quote is, but it's make sure the squeeze is worth the juice. Juice is worth it. Make sure the juice is worth the squeeze. That's the normal saying. Yeah. And I'm saying, actually, the squeeze is worth it even if there's no juice. The process, the practice of it. I really enjoyed my first startup. I then joined 2 startups where, like, from an experience standpoint, both of them had major problems to them, but I still enjoyed learning from those experiences as an employee, even though I had difficulties and challenges within, because I think all of this is fun, and I think all of this is great to learn from, and I truly do have a growth mindset going into them of, like, even if that's, like, the last startup before I started free agency, like, if you go back to me judging that experience, I'd say there was a little bit of, it wasn't what it was supposed to be from the outside, and I could have been really mad being inside of that company, or mad at some people inside that company, or on the way out when things were clearly not working and there was a group of us trying to fix it, there weren't totally receptive people, and I could have been upset about that. But I just go, everyone's trying, or hopefully, and I'm learning from the experience of attempting to fix it. And I did take every stat about the product we're trying to build and improve it, significantly enough that like finally at the end, that was enough evidence for a lot of other people that we just improved everything and still the final metric of revenue was not going up. So clearly like the business model has some fundamental flaws that don't have to do with product or engineering. It's more like core concept. But I don't look back on that and go, man, that was a waste of a year. I go, I grew in that year. I grew in that time. And that allows me to make decisions that maybe feel a little bit risky to everybody else because they go, oh, I'm not, we'll have clients who are like really concerned about $10,000 more in a salary offer. And it's two companies where they really love the one that isn't going to pay them as much. And they'll hear me say to them, like, what's $10,000? And obviously got to contextualize everything for some people. When I say the word $10,000, I'm not saying to someone who doesn't have $10,000. I'm saying to some product manager and one of the offers is $150 and one of the offers is $160. Pick the company you like better.
Yeah.
Every time. Yeah. Pick the company where you're going to learn. Pick the company where you're going to enjoy your work every day. And I've always had that mindset. My relationship to money, I don't seek it. I know I want it for reasons that what it will enable me to try and do and what impact and what projects I'll be able to try in my life and how, I think about just generally a metric of success that will exist in my life. But because I'm a two-time entrepreneur, product person who joins very risky early stage startups, you can kind of tell that I'm not, interested in $10,000 at a time, right? I'm interested in the projects and the skills I'm building and what I'm learning and the ecosystem I'm building for myself.
Yeah. When you talk about like, there was a year and it almost could have seemed like wasted. I think you mentioned that. As you said that, I also thought that relates to what we said earlier about the preparation. Sometimes the wasted year is actually, that was the preparation.
Yeah.
That was the waiting for the bus before the bus was there. That was the preparation.
So true. And this is why I tell people a lot of times who are like, I'm going to start a startup now. Like, okay, what's your idea? Like that is most of the time a terrible, terrible choice. Most people should not just decide to become founders. Even people like me who are founder types, some people consider me unemployable. I've never been fired from a job, so my employers would disagree. But there's this type of people who like everyone says, oh, they should just like start a new thing every time. It's like, no, you don't need to be that way. Some people can be, right? And so they're going to test 9 concepts, or they're going to try one concept. They're going to be okay doing it for a year and pivoting. But for most people, you should know why you're building the thing, and you should have an extreme pull towards it. And that preparation, if you look at my context, is like I knew I didn't have a fantastic idea. The 2 years between, the last thing and free agency. So I joined a company and joined another company. And, how do I think about that? I think about that in terms of like, it's the work that continuously allows me to improve, be experimenting in the space, happen to like stick in the space I've been in of recruiting and jobs, and wait for my moment.
As you say that, one of the things I think about is like, it's a fair point, but what's a good idea? Because, and this is my experience also working in early stage startups. When you're in the team meeting, when you're in the marketing meeting, everyone is throwing out ideas and they all sound like the best thing in the world, right? Like the ideas is abundant. It's really the execution that follows the idea, which is like, that matters. And so then when my mind goes, it's like, okay, so what is a good idea? How does someone, if I'm there, and I'm like, I have an idea, but it's just an idea. How am I like, this is the thing that I should leave everything for and go all in on?
How much it pulls you.
What does that mean?
Because there's like a few different ways to it, right? So it's how much it pulls you, which can be, it pulls you so much because it's such a good idea. Maybe you just ran across an idea, even if it's not your industry or your specialty, but you're like, this is obvious. So it's going to pull you because you're like, I will have success. Or you've been working in this space for this entire time, and the idea you're like, you think it's a good experiment. So it pulls you because you love the space and you're going to be passionate about making that experiment as good as it can be. Or maybe it's another, co-founder, and that co-founder is so compelling to you and it pulls you. Or maybe you start an experiment and it's a side project and it's just growing so fast. So the consumers, they pull you. Something has to pull you because it has to be worth it because it's freaking hard. And execution is hard. When people say what's more important, ideas or execution, I think that's a dumb question. They're both important. What's difficult and important to consider insofar as it relates to should you do something or not is just how much you're going to put into it. And people might call that and tie that to execution. That's not really... they're still just equally important, is my point, right? Like they're too related in terms of the resulting project or startup. It's really, though, how much both of those things are pulling you into being willing to embrace the full potential of the idea and the full necessity that will come from execution. You gotta embrace the upside of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I agree with the point you make about is how much it pulls you, and I think
look at you.
Yeah,
you quit to do this thing.
Yeah,
it
pulled me in.
It pulled you.
It got me. And I think how that shows up, it's different for every person. So to make it contextual, in my case, with this podcast, once I started to realize it was the thing I should do, but I hadn't acted on it yet, like it was just the thought in my mind, like I couldn't sleep. And I don't know, it wasn't like I was uncomfortable or there was something wrong. I just couldn't sleep.
You were too excited.
Yeah.
Your brain was spinning.
Yeah.
You were being obsessive.
Yeah. And it was the fact that you have this in your mind and you're not acting on it. It's like, I'm not even letting you rest.
Yeah.
Like,
well, actually, there's a VC that I remember talking to a couple of years ago, not one of for agencies, who said that he doesn't invest in non-obsessive founders. And so if there's not like the sense that, this sleeplessness.
Yeah.
And I'm chronically sleep deprived, so like I don't sleep a lot to begin with. So I think it's mostly just looking for like what agitates me when I'm not asleep. But I really related to that idea of like, I don't think I'd want to invest in a founder if I was a VC that wasn't obsessive. And when he said that, really resonated, because every founder I've met who's been successful so far, my peers, people ahead, people behind who I think are going to be successful, it might not manifest in sleep. To your point, it's bespoke, but it will manifest in some version of obsession, and that might be contextual to their life, but you'll be able to tell.
Yeah. You know what it is for me? I love sports, so I see a lot of things as like in a sports context. And I was reading Relentless, which is the book by Tim Grover, who's Michael Jordan's trainer,
right.
Kobe Bryant's trainer, trained Dwayne Wade, a bunch of other...
He did like a podcast tour recently too, right?
I think so. He's always on like podcasts. Yeah. He should be on this podcast. That'd be good shit. And one of the things he said, they asked him, he was speaking about what separates, because there's levels to this shit, right? There's the NBA player who's already like, you're already 0.00001% just being an NBA player. And then there's the guy that goes to an all-star game. Then there's like the perennial all-star. Then there's like the... like when people are having like, who's the top 5 player in the NBA or NFL or MLB, you're in the conversation for that. And then there's like the all-time greats.
Yep.
And he was talking about what separates someone who's an all-star, but maybe they haven't gotten to that level. And people talk about it all the time in sports media, which is like, you can be the leader on a championship winning team. Right now it's NFL, it's the playoffs. It's like, can you be a quarterback on a Super Bowl winning team? And he was like, what separates someone who can maybe be an all-star from the person who can lead their organization to a title? And he said, the thing that separates like a Jordan or a Kobe or LeBron or Dwayne Wade, they have an edge. They have something, and usually there's like a kind of a dark component to the edge because it's very extreme. They have an edge, and that edge, that when it's triggered, when it comes down to crunch time, they're going to get into a zone that is just different from anyone else. And he would speak about Jordan and like, when it would get to like the last 2 minutes of a game and it was time to close, like the guy was like robotic, like he was ridiculously intense. And I think when you say the thing about being obsessive, it's like you need to have an edge in some capacity, right? So, and I think for most people, it's just, I'm just going to put more in than anyone else. That is my edge. Like when it comes down to it, when it's crunch time, when everything is kind of equalized, that's going to be the thing we're going to fall back on, is me and the team and whatever. We're going to put more in than what anyone else would do. And that kind of spells out the result in the end.
People are going to call this cringe, because even I used to call this cringe when startup people compare themselves to athletes. But there's this whole thing around The Last Dance, and there's this part where Jordan talks about he's getting a little teary-eyed in the modern day part of the interview. And he says something to the effect of, for folks around him, he wanted them to win as much as he wanted to win. But if they didn't want to win, or if they weren't yet, getting there, his quote is something like, I'm going to get in their ass a little bit and I'm going to push them. And for anyone who doesn't understand it and doesn't understand the cost, that's because they didn't want to win enough.
Yeah.
And I only want to pull the people who want to be around and want to be pulled. And, I really related to that. It's the first time where I was like, I'm going to drop this whole judgment I have of people who do this.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at that. I was thinking of the hard times of free agency. And people want to go, oh, it's not the same. Sure, it's not the same. But basketball is a kid's game. We can say all of these things aren't as important as life and death. Yeah. So unless we are only talking about doctors, we shouldn't even watch The Last Dance. So let's trivialize it all. And I look at that moment and I go, the hard times, the only thing that got me through was my willingness to put in the work. To go through hard times, to be okay with what was getting really challenging, where other people would press a quit button. It's too painful. And I think for folks who are thinking about, a lot of this from this zone of becoming the greatest, yeah, it's true that in the sports arena, it's going to be a little bit more discreet because you have everyone funneling into the same place. It's not that different in business. It depends on the type of business, obviously, right? Like there are lifestyle businesses going to be different. Some of them there are going to be as hard times. Sometimes it's going to be easier. Same thing in venture. Every once in a while, you're going to accidentally create, a really compelling business and it'll be easy. But when it's hard in these contexts, there are a lot more challenges than people realize. I also remember recently reading about, the news around this is like a year old at this point, but Mr.Beast a while ago went through the YouTube, now the influencer of all influencers. I don't watch his content that much, but I was just, reading a bit on his history, and he went through a time when a bunch of his former employees were coming after him for having a quote unquote toxic work environment. And I'm reading that, I'm going, this is like a top 1% of 1% of 1% of all time media person. Did someone expect that his employees were going to have an easy time?
Yeah.
Are we nuts?
Yeah.
What do we expect greatness to be created from? That man has an audience that the people who are taking the pot shots will never have. That doesn't mean he doesn't deserve critique, right? And so if there's something he does that crosses a line, it makes sense. But if he has honorable intention, right, and he's bringing those people with him on this journey, and they're going to reap rewards alongside him, and they opted in, they volunteered for it in the sense that it's the job that they chose.
Yeah.
You're signing up for a once-in-a-lifetime thing that people would kill for.
Yeah. It's like the sacrifices of winning, I guess, on that level. And it's interesting when you bring up that point of The Last Dance. And I very vividly remember that moment because it was one of the few moments in the documentary where, Jordan got emotional.
Yeah.
And I remember him being he's like, I just wanted to win. And, if people didn't want to win as much as I wanted to win, then, I would get onto them. And then he was almost he's stop the recording. And he had to step away.
Yep.
And I was always like, why? People said so much shit about him. There was the whole gambling stuff. There was all of that stuff. I was like, why was that? I don't know. I think about that.
Well,
why did he get emotional at that piece?
I think I've begun to relate to him, in the journey of it all. And I think the reason he gets emotional at that piece is when you've done similar things. I've done similar things of pushing people where they don't want to be pushed. And,
is that selfish? I almost wonder. Is that why?
Funnily enough, probably why he's emotional is because it's selfless. The person pushing goes through a lot of pain, a lot more pain than people think. Everyone thinks it's the person being pushed.
Yeah.
The person being pushed is either going to give up or jump in. The person being pushed is either going to win or lose, fine. It's going to be like an average outcome. But for Jordan in that instance, although you can say, yes, he's going to win and get fame and fortune, whatever, it's going to be painful because that person's not going to like him. Other people are going to critique him. People are going to go after him for it. And he's sacrificing his own life to be that person and then saying, come with me too.
Yeah.
And so all of that is cost. Now, that doesn't mean it's not intense. Yeah. But in that moment, what I think he's experiencing is this notion of, actually, I thought it was selfless to do this. I thought I was doing this person a favor to say,
he feels misunderstood.
Yes. He feels misunderstood in the selflessness of his actions. And I believe they are selfless. Not in some weird, fundamental way. There are more selfless people in the world, but in the context of basketball and what he was attempting to do and bring teammates with him and help them win. on this supposed journey that we're all aligned on. He felt that it was selfless. He paid prices that were hard to pay to try to bring them along, and yet he still didn't get the reward from it that he thought.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember, I think one of the things they show in the documentary is like his life was kind of lonely. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of, I think he even said, he's like, people don't realize how much time I spent in hotel room. I remember listening to Cristiano Ronaldo. It's like the most popular athlete, the most followers, not athlete, any human in the world, the most followers. And he was saying there was an interview, they asked him like, what is your life like? He's like, I'm literally just in the house. He's like, I train and then I'm like in the house. Like I can't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And because he's so globally popular, it's not like one of those things where like,
he has a spot to go to.
Yeah, he can just go to like some remote place. They're like, they know me there as well. Yeah. It's like nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And I think...
And it's not just nowhere to go. It's often, I think this is not necessarily something I've heard, but I believe it's the same thing for entrepreneurs who are dedicated to their craft, or even like operators within companies or within public sector, politicians or physicians, anyone who's obsessed with their craft. They often also spend time they do have. Sometimes they spend it doing nothing or alone because they feel if they're famous, isolated. But sometimes it's also they want to be working on their craft more. And that becomes a self-isolating loop that magnifies any other effect.
Yeah. No, it's lonely. Okay, I wanna switch gears and ask you about this. You said people say you're almost like an encyclopedia for startups. We're kind of heading into like a recession period, I guess, in the economy. And it's funny, actually. Like, as I was making the decision to leave my job, I remember I'd already told my mom, and like I told the people around me and like got their feedback. And my mom always listens to like the news and like the radio. She listens to it like the radio from back home in the UK. And she pulls me one day. She's like, seems like more people are getting laid off. She's like, have you thought about that? And I was like, yeah. I was like, the best companies are built in recessions. I was like,
you were ready with that. Yeah. The first time you saw that line in your brain so many years ago, you've been saving it for the moment.
Anytime anyone questions me about why I'm doing this, best companies are built in recession. So, are there any companies, or maybe you don't even have to go as specific as saying a specific company, but like, are there any industries or things that you think will come out of this next cycle of the economy, and in the same way that certain companies grew during like the 2008 recession and they came out and they were like running shit afterwards, is there anyone that you look at in particular and you're like, I think that after this period they could be up next?
Problems.
Okay.
Because I don't know the specific companies. Yeah, that takes time to play out. I'm not going to pick the obvious of the AI stuff going on right now. I believe in it, actually. I think it's an industry that's real. Everything that's happening in the zeitgeist of OpenAI right now and whatever Google is going to come out with, I think will be a big theme of what comes out of this recession, because it's cost saving, it's potential productivity replacing, so it's interesting. But I'm going to pick 3 other problems that actually I've thought a lot about that I think startups will be created in this space during this time, because it will take advantage of the downturn. The first is anything related to our new relationship to work. Now, I don't mean freelancer tools, and people have this concept of like the positive future of work, of like everyone's going to wake up one morning and there's going to be at least discrete tasks on your dashboard and you're going to do those and that's how you make money. I don't believe in that. That's like Naval's dream of what the future of work looks like. No. But I do think in this, there's a lot that has changed about people's psychology related to work. And I think someone's going to figure out how to, from a company, from a startup standpoint, build tools that will give people more discrete either gamification or reward mechanisms or ways to feel satisfied. Because I think more and more, like, mission isn't driving people. It'll drive some people. It'll people who join for agency, hopefully. But there are a lot of people who, like, they're disconnected from the idea of capitalism as like a structure they want to succeed in. They're trying to opt out. They're not revolutionizing though at the same time, so they're in this weird limbo of like, I'm highly unhappy, I don't want to work within the system, but I don't want to destroy it either. I don't have enough work ethic for that. So they're just like right in the middle and roasted. And so there's going to be something that allows those individuals, or I think there's an opportunity for companies to address that and build different reward mechanisms or different some, again, gamification was it comes to mind. How do you reward someone and keep them engaged when they aren't naturally engaged and aren't naturally, because people will want to employ these individuals, but they'll struggle to keep them happy. They'll struggle to keep them quote unquote loyal, all these things. So that's one problem that I think in this moment we're going to all experience, and someone's going to build some platform off of.
Sorry to cut in, but I'm like, it makes me think, like, what truly motivates. Can everyone actually be motivated in work?
No, we're just reaching new heights or lows. I think it's a very small percent of people, but I think it was enough before. But I think this whole new generation and even older generations are turning to this new apathy towards it. I don't think this level of apathy existed. I think the feeds, TikTok, LinkedIn, etc., are just feeding this apathy that has never before existed around this idea of capitalistic reward. I think it's wrong. It's a problem that I've talked a lot about wanting to like try to fix. I don't know exactly. I mean, free agency is part of this. It's not the original thing I thought we'd be working on, but we try to sort people into slots they'd be happy in. Happy for any of our clients might mean more money, a better boss, a certain industry, a certain type of role, whatever it might be. We are going to be part of the solution here because we will help people sort. But there's something else there too, which is once you're in even those situations, how do you stay happy? How do you have the reward mechanism? Because, the want is highest between the jobs, but while you're in them, that's going to be our new challenge.
Yeah. One of the things that Naval says, he says, in the future, everyone will be an entrepreneur. So everyone will be, and like, I guess the vision of exactly how it happens is kind of nuanced.
Well, he says this task-based thing. He thinks everything is going to become atomic. So you're a product manager. You're going to wake up and you're going to have 8 different contracts you can take.
Yeah.
And you're going to work on it that day. I think the exact opposite trend is about to happen. As the economy and all the money, washed out, companies are going to be more focused on dedicated team members who do longer term work. We're more focused on outcomes and mission driven and team-based assignments. I think he's wrong about this whole atomization. Right now, you're seeing contractors, freelancers are the easiest ones for companies to cut. The relationship is too lightweight, so to speak.
Yeah.
I really don't believe in the future he paints. I'm not sure I'm right. I'm not sure he's wrong, but I just, probabilistically, I don't think it's likely.
You think people would be happier if everyone was entrepreneur?
No. I think people, it's very simple. Right now, Americans, or the world, I think, but I definitely know Americans are at their unhappiest. They're at home. They're working from home. They're disconnected from their friends, their family, their coworkers. We're dating less than ever, blah, 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 blah. And I think working is a huge part of that. We don't want to admit it, right? Because we want it to be everything about our personal lives. But I think people got a lot of things from their workplace. And, people can say all they want about, oh, I want to be at home. I want to be at home. Sure. But the science says you're also the unhappiest you've ever been. Reconcile those things for me.
Is there okay, so here would be the counter argument, right? Which is that essentially work is filling a void.
Can other things fill the void?
Yeah. Is there something else that can fill the void?
Look, but what? That's the honest truth.
Yeah.
What fills our void?
We just haven't. Could it be that we just haven't done it yet?
It could be.
We've built our lives off of work. So work has been filling a bunch of different things. We've been getting a lot of things outside of just doing our job.
Let me totally acknowledge that concept. But if I do, then I'm going to say, we don't know what it is yet. And so like sitting around and waiting for it, doing nothing is not good for us either, right? Like I totally believe that, there's this whole theory of like AI will replace productivity and then we'll all be unhappy and not be able to do anything and die because we lack purpose. I don't believe that. I think we'll find purpose, but we have to find purpose. And in any generational shift, think industrial revolution or whatever else, people become unhappy, unemployed, depressed, and die. So like we shouldn't opt into like this more actively than we need to. Right? Because we'll need to opt into it to some extent if you think just macro, as sad as that is. It's just what happens when you have revolutions in how we live and work. We shouldn't try to be proactive about getting into the state where we're all just like doing the thing of saying, this was fakely filling this void. Therefore, I'd rather remove this fake thing and just have the void. So shit. Yeah. Now I've got to deal with the fact I have the void.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I have this weird thing in life where I'm like, sometimes you do kind of just need to like sit in the shit for a little while.
That's true.
Like you need to.
Certain people, though, keep in mind, I think
Yeah.
you're different than other people, and I'm different than
Yeah.
other people. We're probably, I don't say this to brag at all. In fact, this might make us unhappier people longer term in life, or this might make us crazy or unlikable. But we're like highly intellectualizing ourselves as we live our lives. So you sitting there in the dark in the void is way different than someone who on a base level has like a higher threshold of what they need to be satisfied. Like I'll make a statement and you tell me if it's true or false about you. Like, are you in a relationship right now?
No.
How long has it been since your last relationship?
Oh, it's been a long time.
Me too. And both of us seem fine right now. Like you seem like you're content.
Yeah.
And I'm content. There are people who like can't go 6 months.
Yeah.
Similar relationship to the void. They're not as comfortable with the void as you and me.
That is an interesting line of conversation, actually, like the void. I think that has a lot to do with like being independent.
Yeah.
And really valuing like independence, even if that means being alone at certain points. But anyway, here's where I want to finish off. One of the things that you spoke about earlier was you mentioned it in passing, which is like people. One of your first ideas was how people can be more intentional with their first job. And then obviously we were just talking about like, how can people be happy? How can people be happy in work? If I'm heading into this recession period and I want to be intentional about my work for the first time, what does that mean? What should I be doing? Why is that even something that I should be striving for? Break it down why you've put like, why is that such a core component of like how you think about work, how you think about your company even. I've heard you mention it multiple times. It's like being intentional with your work and like where you put your time.
It puts you in the driver's seat no matter what your long-term goal is. So being intentional about your career does not necessarily mean, for example, for one person, it might mean that on the long term, they want to retire early, whereas for another person, it might mean making the most money possible. And as long as you're intentional and succeeding at your early mid-career, building a really great career in general, you won't have the lack of optionality a lot of people have when they reach the later stages of their career and they haven't been intentional and they've kind of just been doing okay and they haven't been making progress in the same way. They lack the most optionality. It comes later, right? So like they're maybe taking some vacations that you're not taking, or they may be slightly happier because they're a slightly less stressful job. I don't know. But all of that eventually comes to roost. If you're intentional, let's say, for example, during the recession, you're putting yourself in the driver's seat that out of the recession, you have the most optionality of your peer group. So if you work for a company where you know you're going to learn and make impact, or you work for a company where it might seem like a slog in this time, but like it's going to look good on the other end, then when you're on the other end, you're going to be cream of the crop. And you get to join an even better company or stay at your company or get the promotion you want, be in the role you want. And suddenly what winds up happening is you can actually fundamentally make choices for yourself now, whether those choices are to become an entrepreneur, whether those choices are to continue down a certain path, switch roles, make more money, get better work-life balance. It totally, again, depends on your goals as the person, but that's why. Then how is every moment you have to optimize that moment? As in, you're in a career choice right now, let's say someone is between jobs. They should take that job search as seriously as they are capable of taking it. And that's going to be different for every person. Their optionality is going to be different. The roles they're relevant for will be different. Their capacity to interview, they'll have ceilings in terms of their interview skills. But all of these relate to, in this job search, get the best outcome possible. So that you're in a place where you're maximized in terms of how much you're learning, how much you're proving, how much you're building evidence. So the next job search, you have all of the optionality from what you've built. So if you're in a job search, if you're at a job, do really well. Don't just coast. Because if you do really well, you're building evidence and proof points. Even if you hate your boss or hate your company, people will be like, oh, now I'm just going to quiet quit or whatever. And I'm not trying to be on that trend line of quiet whatever. I hate that too. But I'm just saying, like, don't just coast, because then you coasting is not you proving yourself for your next employer you want to go to. You are now being mediocre at a job you don't like, which means you're more likely to be stuck in that job. So being intentional is about giving yourself, you and me kind of get this naturally, this independence factor. You got to put yourself in the driver's seat. And by being intentional about how you work, where you work, what you work in, you're more likely to be in that driver's seat.
Yeah. I think this is a good place to finish off, actually. While you were explaining that, it kind of clocked in my mind a lot of the unhappiness, especially with working, but in every sense, even in dating, in where you live, in like your friendships, it stems from having like a lack of options.
Yeah.
Because I hear it so often, right? Which is like someone really doesn't like their job and they want to leave. And if you ask them, you're like, okay, you hate your job, you don't like your boss, you don't like what you're working on. Maybe it's just not something that speaks to you. Like, why do you stay? And it's like, oh, I need to pay my mortgage. I need to pay my bills. I have children. They just give you a whole list of responsibilities. And essentially what those responsibilities have done, it means their only option is to stay, which is why they stay. Mm-hmm. So if you really go to the core, it's a lack of options. And I do think there's bad things with having too many options as well on the other side. But I think what you say is smart from the sense of like, do things that just give you optionality so that you're not forced to do things that make you unhappy.
Exactly. As an entrepreneur, as a worker, as all of it, that's exactly. Just give yourself the flexibility.
Yeah.
Give yourself the shots on goal, the luck surface area. Put yourself in enough of a position that the coin flip will land in your favor.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I love when podcast episodes come like full circle.
Nailed that one.
Before we end the episode, a quick word from our sponsor, Free Agency. What if I told you there is a good chance you're leaving money on the table in your career? It would kind of annoy you a bit, right? Well, Free Agency aims to stop that. They represent and manage talent in the tech industry. Here's how they do it. First, they provide you with a dedicated talent agent. Think about this as your career quarterback. They understand you and your career goals. Based on that understanding, they bring you suitable interviews at top firms. You focus on smashing the interview, and together with their network, research, negotiation expertise, they will make sure you get a top of market salary. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel. We're having fire conversations every week on the podcast.